إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة. فمن أطاعه دخل الجنة ومن عصاه دخل النار. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم. وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. ثم أما بعد. The hadith reported in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and his Sahaba, they were traveling. And during this instance, Allah Jalla wa Ala commanded the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to warn his companions, and as an effect the entire ummah as a whole, to seek refuge of Allah Jalla wa Ala for 4 great tribulations of this world. And thus the Prophet ﷺ was traveling, riding his beast, and suddenly the beast became extremely frightened, as if though it wanted to throw the Prophet ﷺ off its back. And he began acting in an absurd, abnormal manner, to which the Prophet ﷺ looked towards the earth, and he found that on the earth there were certain amounts of graves. Some of the Sahaba mentioned around 4 or 5 or 6 different graves that were buried there. So he inquired sallallahu alayhi wa sallam about the reality and the lives of the people that were buried in these graves. It was informed to him that the people who were buried here were those who lived a life of shirk and disobedience to Allah Jalla wa Ala, and thus were buried upon shirk and buried upon the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to his companions, he said, right now these people are being punished by Allah Jalla wa Ala. Right now the torments of the grave is an occurrence for them all. He said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that if Allah Jalla wa Ala didn't permit or didn't decree for the bodies to be buried like this, I would have asked Allah Jalla wa Ala that you are able to hear their punishment and hear their trials. And if you weren't able to hear them, you would be thrown on your faces. He then, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, gave them the 4 pieces of advice. The 4 things you seek refuge of Allah Jalla wa Ala from in this dunya before it is too late. He said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ta'awwadhu billah min adhab an-nar. Ta'awwadhu billah min adhab an-nar. Seek refuge with Allah Jalla wa Ala from the punishment of the fire. The Sahaba said, na'udhu billah min adhab an-nar. We seek refuge of Allah from the punishment of the fire. He says sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ta'awwadhu billah min adhab al-qabr. Ta'awwadhu billah min adhab al-qabr. Seek refuge of Allah from the punishment of the grave. They said, na'udhu billah min adhab al-qabr. We seek refuge of Allah from the punishment of the grave. He said, ta'awwadhu billah min al-fitan ma dhahara minha wa ma batan. He said, ta'awwadhu billah min al-fitan ma dhahara minha wa ma batan. Seek refuge of Allah from trials and tribulations, those that are apparent and those that are hidden. They said, na'udhu billah min al-fitan ma dhahara minha wa ma batan. We seek refuge of Allah from trials and tribulations, those that are apparent and those that are hidden. He said, تعوذوا بالله من فتنة الدجال, and seek refuge with Allah from the trials and the tribulations of the Dajjal. They said, نعوذ بالله من فتنة الدجال. Oh brothers in Islam, let us contemplate and ponder, to whom is the Prophet ﷺ speaking to? He is speaking to the Sahaba, those to whom Allah Jalla wa Ala has already promised, رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه, that they are pleased with Allah and Allah Jalla wa Ala is pleased with them. Their places in paradise has already been promised. From amongst them are the likes of Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali, the Ashra, Mubashara, and those others who have been promised paradise and promised the pleasure of Allah, yet still He is telling them to seek refuge. Seek refuge of Allah, commanding them rather to seek refuge of Allah from the fire, to seek refuge of Allah from the grave, to seek refuge of Allah from trials and tribulations, to seek refuge of Allah from the Dajjal. 4 important points of refuge. In fact, some of the scholars of the Madinah and some of the Sahaba used to consider it to be obligatory, yes, obligatory, to seek refuge of Allah from these very 4 things before you complete your prayer. And they used to consider it to be some kind of deficient salah, a salah that is not complete, if a person has not sought refuge of Allah Jalla wa Ala from these 4 things. For he said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in another hadith reported in Sahih Muslim, إِذَا تَشَهَدَ أَحَدُكُمْ, if any of you sits in tashahud, فَلْيَسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ أَرْبَعٍ, then make him seek refuge of Allah Jalla wa Ala from 4 things. Let him say, اللهم إني أعوذ بك من عذاب جهنم ومن عذاب القبر ومن فتنة المحيا والممات ومن شر فتنة المسيح الدجال. Let him say, oh Allah, I seek refuge of you from the fire. I seek refuge with you from the qabr. I seek refuge from you from the trials and the tribulations of the life, and the trials and the tribulations of the dunya, and the trials and the tribulations of the akhirah, and the trials and the tribulations upon death. And I seek refuge with you from the evil or the trials and the tribulations of the Dajjal. The believer must traverse upon this earth seeking refuge from these 4 important tests upon the believer. Every salah he performs, he must seek refuge of Allah Jalla wa Ala from these 4 matters. His entire life should be such that he makes a shield from all of these 4 directions. For a believer is overcome with the fitna of the fire, with the fitna of the qabr, with the fitna of the tests of this life, the trials and tribulations of this life, and the fitna of the Dajjal. Today, inshallah ta'ala, what remains of this khutbah is only a few more minutes. And that's what I'd like to speak about, inshallah ta'ala, or rather emphasize, is just the fitna, or the fact that a person must seek refuge of Allah Jalla wa Ala from fitan, from trials and tribulations, مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَمَا بَطَنَ, what is apparent of them and what is concealed of them. For he commanded the Prophet ﷺ to seek refuge amongst fitna. What is fitna? Fitna is a terminology that has been given to every single delight and every single adornment and every single part of this dunya that is a distraction to a person in his akhirah. Every form of distraction in this dunya that distracts you from the remembrance of Allah, or to seek His pleasure, or to attain a level that you can possibly attain, is considered to be a fitna. And thus wealth can distract a person from the remembrance of Allah, is considered to be a fitna. Women, it can distract a person from the remembrance of Allah or His pleasure, is considered to be a fitna. The Dajjal is a fitna. Why? Because it distracts a person from the fitna, from the temptation, or rather from the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And thus every single form of destruction of this dunya is classified as a fitna. And the 2 greatest forms of trials and tribulations of this world is the fitna of wealth and the fitna of women. Is the fitna of wealth and the fitna of women. For fitna can be matters that distract you from you having certainty in the deen of Allah, called ash-shubuhat, doubts and desires, doubts and remarks, and points that makes you think and contemplate and doubt the deen of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And desires whereby we have things like wealth and money and other sorts of games and distractions of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With regards to wealth, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in a hadith reported in Sahih Bukhari that there will come a group of people, لا يبالي المرء بما أخذ المال. They won't know where they've taken their money from. Is it halal or is it haram? They will take money, they will be wealthy in every single regard, but they won't know where they've taken their money from. Is it halal or is it haram? Such that their food will be haram, their wealth will be haram, their clothing will be haram, the things that they treat their families with will be haram. And we're living at this time right now with the majority of the people, they don't know the intricate details of where their money is coming from. Is it halal or is it haram? Is it halal or is it haram? The food that they're eating, the water that they're drinking, the bills that they're paying for, has it come from halal or has it come from haram? He's speaking about us, and this is why he commanded us as an ummah as a whole to seek refuge from things that are apparent and to seek refuge from things that are hidden. And this is why Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he heard about this hadith of seeking refuge of 4 things in the tashahhud, he never completed his salah ever again except that he sought refuge in Allah Jalla wa Ala from these 4 things. With regards to the fitna of women, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, وَاتَّقُوا النِّسَاء وَاتَّقُوا النِّسَاء Fear women, فَإِنَّ أَوَّلَ فِتْنَةِ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. For the first fitna of the people of Israel, كانت النساء. The first fitna of the people of Israel was the fitna of women. And this is going to be our great fitna too, the fitna of women. And this is why Allah Jalla wa Ala, when He commanded the slaves of Allah to stay away from zina, He didn't say, do not commit zina. Rather He said, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. Don't even come close to zina. Indicating that every single avenue towards meeting women, every single avenue towards befriending women, every single avenue to pleasing women, every single avenue to making your heart soft for women, all of these avenues are haram. All of these avenues have been prohibited. The 2 great fitnas of this ummah is the fitna of wealth and the fitna of women. And thus, O slaves of Allah Jalla wa Ala, live your lives by safeguarding yourselves from the trials and tribulations that the Prophet ﷺ has warned against. تعوذوا بالله من فتنة النار ومن فتنة القبر ومن فتنة مسيح الدجال ومن الفتنة ما ظهر منها وما بطن. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إن الله تعالى غفور رحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. Due to the current pandemic that each and every single one of us are living through, no doubt a person's health and his well-being is something that is extremely valuable for him to be able to worship Allah correctly and perfectly. And thus, this disease is considered to be a fitna. A fitna which each and every single person must safeguard himself from and take the appropriate measures whereby he is safe and sound, and he'll be safe and sound for himself, his family, his companions, and those he will meet in the masjid or wherever he goes. And thus some etiquettes, inshallah ta'ala, the masjid would like for all of the people who come to pray in it to be aware of are as follows, inshallah ta'ala. The first is, if any of the people who come to the masjid find with them any symptoms of this disease, they must isolate and stay away from the masjid. From the goals of the Sharia of Allah Jalla wa Ala is hifdhun nafs, is to protect yourselves and protect the ummah as a whole. And thus perhaps some of the scholars of Islam, you can understand their statements when they refer to the fact that the one who has these symptoms is obliged to stay at home and not come to the masjid. For they consider the greater effect of the people rather than the effect of the person. Number two, whenever a person enters or leaves this masjid, let him make use of the hand sanitizers that are found in the corridors. Number three, every person who performs his salah should bring with him his own mat and a face mask. And if they can't find قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ مَا شَفَعَ لَدَيْ فَضَّةٍ, for mankind are called insan for a reason, they do forget, as a one-off, not on a regular occasion. The masjid on those one-off situations will provide a face mask or a prayer mat, inshallah ta'ala. But for the general situation, every person should bring with him a face mask and a prayer mat. Number four, with regards to leaving the masjid, each and every single person must not gather outside the masjid. And we look around London and we are seeing the greatest masjids, the biggest masjids close. Our stance as a masjid is no, we understand that this is the masjid of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Yes, as committee members, yes, as chairmen, yes, as imams, yes, as followers, or those people who pray in the masjid, we have some say in regards to the running of the masjid. We will understand that this is the house of Allah Jalla wa Ala. It's a waqf of Allah Jalla wa Ala. So we cannot close the masjids. We have no right to close the house of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Just like we have no right to say you cannot perform salah in this masjid and you can't perform salah in the masjid. And thus our masjid, this masjid, your masjid, Allah's masjid, will remain open inshallah ta'ala until we are commanded by the government to close it. This is our stance inshallah ta'ala. But for this stance to be able to be applicable, we need the people who pray in this masjid to follow etiquettes and manners. And that is not to gather outside the masjid. Not to gather outside the masjid. We understand that the salah of Asr is very close towards al-Jumu'ah. So perhaps sit in your cars. Or worst case scenario, if the masjid decides to remain open until Asr, stay in the masjid and do not leave the masjid. But do not gather outside. For this only causes unwanted attention. And it's only caused towards all other greater reasons for the masjid to become closed. And that's what we'll do inshallah ta'ala, is that after each salah or the main salah of Jumu'ah, the imam will allow or call towards the last lines of the masjid to leave first. And once they leave, the lines before them, and once they leave, the lines before them, until every person is dispersed and no one is gathering outside, inshallah ta'ala. And finally, as you all know, this masjid is the house of Allah Jalla wa Ala. This masjid belongs to no individual, belongs to no person, belongs to no family, belongs to no creed or belongs to no nationality or community. It belongs to Allah Jalla wa Ala, and it belongs to the Muslims as a whole. We look around in this masjid and we see different colors, different backgrounds, different nationalities. There is no discrimination upon anyone. The masjid of Allah Jalla wa Ala is entirely run upon Ahl al-Sadaqah, those people who give sadaqah. And during these times of troublesome, during these times of difficulty, the masjid does not have many people who are donating towards it. Until it's come to its last very ends. And so we remind you inshallah ta'ala, to not forget the house of Allah Jalla wa Ala in your sadaqah. Do not forget the house of Allah Jalla wa Ala in your sadaqah. And finally, to aiding towards minimizing the effect of this disease, from next week onwards inshallah ta'ala, the khutbah will only last for 10 minutes. And the salah will take place approximately at 1:45. The khutbah will begin at 12:30. It will end by around 12:40 inshallah. And the salah will take place thereafter straight away. And so if you are running late, do not expect the salah to begin at 1 o'clock. For the salah will be much closer towards the khutbah inshallah ta'ala. We ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to keep us safe and to keep us sound. We ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to keep our families all healthy. We ask Allah Jalla wa ala to anyone who has been decreed this fitna, this disease, to cure them, to make them steadfast, to make them patient. We ask Allah Jalla wa ala to make us of those who seek refuge with Him in the four matters that we spoke about in the first khutbah. We ask Allah Jalla wa ala to make us comfortable and to make us safe from these four matters. We ask Allah Jalla wa ala to make us from the inhabitants of paradise. We ask Allah Jalla wa ala to make us from the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Jannah. We ask Allah Jalla wa ala to make us of those who see His most honorable face. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد وصلى الله على نبي محمد وعلى اله وصحبه واصحابه اجمعين قوموا للصلاه